That was gorgeous. Thank you. What made Mary so joyful? Listen to this. My soul magnifies the Holy One, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior. For God has looked with compassion on the lowliness of God's servant. Surely, from now on, all generations will call me blessed, for the Mighty One has done great things for me. Holy is God's name. God's mercy flows from age to age for all who live in reverence. God has shown strength with a powerful arm. God has scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. God has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the humble. God has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. God has helped Israel, God's servant, remembering the promise of mercy. The promise made to Abraham and to his descendants forever. She's joyful, isn't she? It's just gushing out of her. Think about her historical moment, though. Here is an unwed, pregnant teenager under the thumb of empire. All the circumstances surrounding her would not suggest joy. Right? How could she be so joyful with those kinds of circumstances closing in? Some of them, the circumstances she faced, sound awfully familiar and boringly repetitive. Wow. But I think she could be so joyful because she saw the big picture. And she wasn't hung up in the digital frame of the moment. I pastored First Baptist Church in Winchester, Virginia, and there were a lot of great preachers there. A lot of great preachers preceded me there, and like great preachers preceded me here. And like you get filet mignon every Sunday. I'm bringing you some grilled cheese. But one of the greatest privileges of being in a congregation like this, and Vicki and I have already felt it since we've been here, is the embrace of the community that looks past those digital moments. Right? I met a watercolor artist in Winchester when I was pastor there. His name is Eugene B. Smith, and you can look him up online. I love his watercolor artistry. He's magnificent. And I would go down on a regular basis to his gallery there in Winchester and just admire his paintings. I couldn't afford most of them. Finally, he had one of the Means Bottom Bridge. It's a covered bridge that crosses the North Fork of the Shenandoah River just south of Glasgow, Virginia. And I love that picture. And I was leaning in looking at it one day and noticed the price on the print. And he said, well, you're my sister's pastor. I'll give it to you for half price. And I don't like taking ministerial discounts. You know what I mean? But I did that day. Got that beautiful picture, framed it up, simple frame, and it's hanging on the wall of our bedroom. We love it. But Gene was a story trawler. He pulled up stories from everywhere, and I'm a preacher, I need a story or two, right? And so he told me the story about that painting because I was looking at it, and he said he had the original elaborately framed and on a stand at an art show in Florida. And when the art show opened, this man walked up, gazed at the picture at length, and then walked away. Came back a little while later, looked at the picture again, walked away. Several more times throughout the day until finally the day, when the day came to a close at the end of the art show, he came once more. And he leaned in real close, and Gene walked over to him. Gene's not a hard sell guy. Art's subjective, you have to love it. and he's not going to twist anybody's arm, but he saw this guy was really interested, and so he walked over to him and said, "Sir, you're obviously interested in this painting. Why don't you just go ahead and get it?" Man said, "Would you sell me just the frame?" True story. That guy really didn't get the picture. Gene had the price of the painting on the frame, and the man had been looking at that price on the frame. Gene said, "The frame will cost you, the picture's for free." Two things about that. One, what do you think that did to the heart of the artist? Number two, here is a guy who was going to an art show and he was leaving with nothing. What is it like going to an art show looking for frames and never seeing a picture? To me, that's what our religion, what our politics so much has become in our country. Concentrating on the frame, on that which we use to try to get people into the picture. But we forget to get into the picture. And Mary was not hung up on the frame. She had gotten the picture. Right? Wow. Fantastic. The frame, though, societies really can get obsessed with frames. They get hung up on the frames. We can see it in the news all the time. After all, frames sell. Frames, when you're getting the doctrines right, the orthodoxies right, the theologies, the politics, figuring out what person is righteous, what person God likes, what person God does not like. Does that sound familiar? We get a lot of that, don't we? And that raises anxiety. Of course, that also sells. You notice that's the way social media works, right? It monetizes anxiety. That's nothing new. Television's been doing that for years, spending more on advertising to raise your anxiety that you're not catching up than all of the public school system's budgets combined. That's what they spend on advertising to raise our anxiety. So when we start looking at those frames, at those endeavors to control, our anxiety comes up, and the frame is not where joy resides. That's where anxiety resides. That's why Mary evidently wasn't all that anxious. She may have felt some anticipatory sorrow. I don't know. That's been projected into her, but I can quite imagine that would be the case. But she got the picture. And it is in the picture where the joy emerges. Another artist I met while I was in Winchester was a guy named Jack Fretwell. Jack Fretwell had a big band in the 1950s and 60s, and was very successful. He needed a female singer. He got a wonderful singer from across the tracks, wrong side of the tracks in Winchester, and got her to sing. She was so good that a scout from Nashville came and got her and took her away, and she recorded under the name Patsy Cline. Yeah, that's Jack Fretwell. Jack always said to me, "Jack Fretwell is the name. If you're going to fret, fret well." First time I met Jack, he came up to me and said, "Pastor, my wife and I are having a lot of problems." I said, "Well, let's step over here and talk about that, Jack." He said, "Yeah, we bought a waterbed and we drifted apart." Another time, this is just before we processed in at First Baptist Winchester. We wore robes at First Baptist Winchester. We were almost Episcopalians. I meant that benevolently. We were about ready to go in. He came up and he said, "Pastor, I'm 70 years old and I don't need glasses." I said, "That's great, Jack." He said, "Yeah, drink it right out of the bottle." That's the way he was. And that last joke was ironic because Jack had nearly lost his marriage, lost his band, lost his business because he was an alcoholic. His wife told him, you're going to lose everything, including me, if you don't get into recovery. And he got into recovery. He got on the wagon, and he never got off. And then he devoted his life to bringing other people along, sponsoring them. You'll excuse me just for a second, I hope. I had throat cancer some years ago, and they did radiation on me, and they killed off my saliva glands. And so this is my auxiliary saliva. Here we go. Jack could really resonate with the folks who were hurting. This guy who could resonate with folks hurting, coming up with one-liners like that. You know what you call a fly with no wings? A walk. And then Jack would say, I know, it's not any good, I hate myself. It wasn't good, but it was short. One day, after I delivered the benediction, I'd walked up the aisle, and I was taking the vestibule review. You know what I'm talking about?
I enjoyed that sermon, Pastor.
No, you didn't. If you had heard it, you wouldn't have enjoyed it. Stuff like that, you know. And this man came walking up the aisle after a few other folks had gone, and he leaned into me and he breathed on me, and I could tell it wasn't Pepsi he had been drinking that morning. He said, let me introduce to you my wife and children. And there was a woman standing there who looked very tired and very embarrassed, and two children cowering in the folds of her skirt. He said, they didn't want to come to church today, but I made them because I'm the man of the house. And I am the spiritual leader. And so they came because they know that I rule. And all this time, this cloud of toxicity was around my head. And about that time, Jack emerged from the sanctuary and looked, saw the man, stared at the back of his head for a second, then looked at me and winked. And then walked up to the man, put his arm around his shoulder. And about that time, a woman he worked with, Janet Luttrell, came walking out, saw what was going on, walked over, put her arm around the woman, and they together ushered her off, the family, the woman, the two children, and the man who was obviously inebriated off to the side. They talked for a little while I was greeting other people and not hearing what they were saying, so distracted was I by what was going over there in the corner. Jack came back over to me, and he said, don't write these people off, Pastor. Something good is happening here. Obviously not hung up on the frame, right? I'm going to cut to the chase. Long story short. The man never did own up to his addiction. He disappeared. He lost his marriage, lost visiting rights to his children, lost his business, left town. We never heard from him again. The wife actually turned out to be his girlfriend, although the two girls were his children. But his ex-wife wouldn't let the children visit unless the girlfriend was present. She trusted the girlfriend more than her ex-husband. Jack got the girlfriend to go into codependency counseling. She got into codependency counseling. She called up her friend now, the ex-wife of her now ex-boyfriend, and told her, there's good stuff happening at First Baptist Winchester. You ought to take the children there. There's a great children program going on. The ex-wife did, brought the children. Then the ex-wife brought her new husband. The now ex-girlfriend, whose name is Greta, not her real name, but we need a name here, and you'll see why in a couple of minutes, Greta Smith. Greta Smith kept coming to church because she felt such an embrace from the women in the church and such acceptance that she hadn't been judged and pushed out. And then she told her daughter about the church, and her daughter came, and her daughter brought her boyfriend, and her boyfriend brought his best friend, who brought his girlfriend. Greta got stayed in counseling. She got a job at the Winchester Medical Center as a nurse. And while working at the Winchester Medical Center, met John, another nurse, brought him to church. I performed their wedding. Boy, was that fun. In the span of about 5 years, 2 pews in that big old sanctuary couldn't hold all the people who had found blessed community, because those folks were not hung up on the frame and were painting their own strokes of a picture. I received an invitation a couple of months ago, 4 or 5 months ago actually now, to attend a reunion of sorts at First Baptist Winchester, and I couldn't go. But it was signed by the chair of the deacons, Greta Smith. I'm telling you, folks, when we're not hung up on the frame, when we get the picture, we can paint beautiful strokes ourselves. And when you get the picture, that's when you know the heart of the artist. Get the picture?